Welcome to our Week 16 NFL picks and predictions. Our first game is Thursday Night Football, and it's the Los Angeles Chargers hosting the Denver Broncos. This is a huge game for both of these teams. Pretty much whoever wins this game is going to clinch their playoff spot in the AFC. They won't officially clinch it, but their odds are going to go up to above 97% whoever wins this game. Not only is it impacting who makes the playoffs or who clinches the playoffs, but if they both end up making it, which they most likely will, it will have a huge impact on the seeding. The Broncos are coming off a 31-13 victory over the Colts, and when you look at it and just look at the score, it looks like it was a blowout, but it really did not play out that way for Denver. Indy was actually able to get up and down the field a lot easier than Denver, and they finished with more passing yards and almost double the rushing yards that Denver had. Indy also started the game 10-0 after Bo Nix threw a bad interception, and at one point, Jonathan Taylor scored a touchdown that made the score 20-7. The only problem is that he let go of the football before he crossed the goal line, so the touchdown did not count, and they turned the ball over. So it went from 20-7 to 13-7, then it was 13-10, and then 17-13 heading into the fourth quarter. The Broncos took the lead, and right after they took the lead 17-13, the Colts attempted a double pass. Richardson threw it to the wide receiver, and the wide receiver tried to throw it back to him, and it was a pick six. It was an absolutely atrocious play, and all of a sudden it was 24-13, and the game was pretty much over. Really, everything that could have gone wrong for Indianapolis did. They had 3 total fumbles and 3 interceptions. All of that is to say that Denver just really didn't look that great, even though they were able to come up with the win. Bo Nix threw 3 interceptions, and really none of them were that close. The Chargers, on the other hand, are coming off a game I'm sure they would love to forget. They got absolutely dog walked by Tampa Bay in LA. Tampa beat them 40-17 while having 500 passing yards and 223 rushing yards. LA couldn't get more than 32 yards on the ground, and they were over 6 on third down conversions and over 2 on fourth down conversions. So pretty much if you stop them on first and second down, you were going to get the ball back. Like I said, this is a huge game for both teams, and just based off last week, I don't feel really good about either one of them. And I know that LA's game was definitely worse because they actually lost, and they lost by a lot. The Broncos have a better run defense, and the Chargers have a better pass defense, supposedly, even though they gave up 500 yards to Tampa Bay last week. But I do think these teams are pretty even overall, and I think that LA is going to bounce back from their loss to Tampa Bay last week, and I think they're going to get this win at home against Denver. Then on Saturday, we have the Chiefs hosting the Texans. Kansas City is coming off a 21-7 victory over Cleveland. However, unfortunately, Patrick Mahomes did suffer a high ankle sprain in that game, and as of right now, as I'm making this video, he is still questionable for this Saturday game. Houston is coming off a pretty ugly win against Miami, a game in which Tua threw 3 really bad interceptions, and he made it almost impossible for Miami to win, even though Houston didn't really have their best game either. Houston ended up ending the game with only 181 total yards on offense, and I really haven't felt that great about Houston this year. They did end up clinching the 4th seed in the playoffs because their division is just terrible this year, but I think the 5, 6, and 7 seed, Baltimore, Denver, and LA would all be pretty comfortable matching up against Houston in the first round of the playoffs, even if it's in Houston. Kansas City and Houston have both been pretty middle of the pack this year in offense. Kansas City maybe a little bit better, but I don't think anybody's really been blown away with their performances. But KC's defense is still top 5 in points allowed per game and yards allowed per game, and I think that they're just hoping that the offense will take that next step up by the time the playoffs come around. If Pat ends up playing in this game, I just think Kansas City's a better team, and I don't think they'll really have any problem with Houston. However, if he's not in there and Carson Wentz does start, I will probably roll with Houston. So my pick is kind of contingent on whether Pat is playing or not. Pretty much if Pat plays, I'm taking the Chiefs. If not, I will take the Texans. The other Saturday game that we have is the Baltimore Ravens hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is going to be a massive game, especially for the AFC North. Pittsburgh is currently 1 game ahead of Baltimore right now, so they are currently leading that division. Pittsburgh's coming off a tough loss to Philly last week. George Pickens did not play in that game, and as of this video, again, he did not practice on Wednesday, so he is still questionable for this game on Saturday. In that Philly game, Pittsburgh only had 163 yards on offense, and Najee Harris ended the game with 14 rushing yards. And I feel like we talk about this every week, but their offense just isn't built to where it needs to be in order to make a playoff push, in my opinion. And this is even intensified if George Pickens is not healthy. Baltimore is coming off a 35-14 victory over the Giants, which I think we all expected. Baltimore and Pittsburgh both are top 5 in run defense this year, and both of them are bottom half of the league in pass defense. I think we've mentioned this in a video before, but Baltimore is literally the #1 ranked running defense right now and the 31st ranked, second to last in pass defense, which is a very strange dynamic to have as a team. But clearly the way to beat these guys is in the air. The biggest difference to me and the biggest way to look at this game is that both defenses, like I mentioned, have really good run defenses. And so if we just take the running game out of it, which is probably pretty unlikely for Pittsburgh to be able to actually stop Baltimore's running game because they have one of the best running offenses in the league. But even if we say we did that and we move to the passing offenses and who's going to be able to take advantage of those secondaries more, the advantage still goes to Baltimore. They're number 3 in passing yards per game this year, and Pittsburgh is number 24, and probably worse when Pickens is not playing. I know the noise and the hype around Baltimore has slowed down a bit this year, and not as many people are talking about Lamar for MVP, but I do think if we look at that run defense and how well they're playing as a total offense right now, they are still one of the top contenders in the league, and I think they're just a flat out better team than Pittsburgh. So I'm going to take Baltimore in this one at home, beating the Steelers. Then moving over to our Sunday slate, we have the Falcons hosting the New York Giants. Kirk Cousins has officially been benched for the Falcons, and Michael Penix is making his first start as a rookie. They're coming off a very ugly 15-9 win over Vegas, where Kirk only had 112 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. They're currently 7-7 with a slim chance of making the playoffs, but I think that they feel like they've reached their ceiling with Kirk as a quarterback, and they might as well just figure out what they have with Penix, and who knows, maybe they go on a little run the last 3 games. I think this is also a really good game for Penix to start as his first career start because it's a home game and it's against the Giants, who are just not good at football this year. I think Atlanta will have some new energy with Penix. I think their fans will be fired up to see him in there. I think New York is probably tanking for Shedeur Sanders right now, and even if they weren't, they're still not very good, so I'm going to take Atlanta beating New York. Then we have the Panthers hosting the Cardinals, and the Panthers are coming off their 4th straight loss, and this one against Dallas. They lost the game 30-14, and they really didn't have a chance to win the entire game. People started to get really excited about Carolina because they kept it close with KC, Tampa, and Philly, but I really do think that might have something to do with them just playing down to their competition. Statistically, Carolina is one of the worst 3 teams in the league. They're 28th in points scored per game, 31st in yards per game, 32nd, which is dead last, in points allowed per game, and 31st in yards allowed per game. They're literally near dead last in all the major categories. They're also 32nd in rushing yards allowed per game, which I think Arizona is going to be able to take advantage of with James Conner and Kyler Murray. The Cardinals are coming off their 30-17 victory over the Patriots. Arizona has obviously had a disappointing season compared to where I think other people expect them to be, and I think obviously where they wanted to be, but they're just not at the same level of bad as Carolina. James Conner has had a really good season, and Kyler Murray is also a threat on the ground, and they've snuck their way into the top 7 rushing offenses in the league. Their passing game hasn't really been where they'd want it to be, and their defense is pretty middle of the pack, but I think they have much better pieces in almost every spot, and I just think they'll be able to pull this win off and beat Carolina. Then we have the Chicago Bears hosting the Detroit Lions. The Lions are playing the Bears again after their Thanksgiving scare a few weeks ago where Chicago almost beat them in Detroit. And the Lions are coming off a 48-42 loss against Buffalo at home. I think it's safe to say that if you're a fan of a team whose season is already over, like myself with my Cowboys, the Bills-Lions is probably the Super Bowl that you're rooting for right now. 90 points combined in a football game is crazy, and to see 2 offenses that electric and, to be honest, 2 defenses not great in a Super Bowl would be kind of crazy, and I think very entertaining. In that game, Allen threw for 362 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Goff threw for 494 yards and 5 touchdowns. It would just be a joy to watch. However, having said that, I do think that this has solidified that both teams have major problems on defense. Detroit's run defense has been okay, but their secondary is getting absolutely shredded. Chicago, on the other hand, is coming off a 30-12 loss in Minnesota, and it seems like even though Eberflus appeared to be a terrible football coach, there are many other problems that this team needs to address. They were 1 for 12 on 3rd down conversions against the Vikings, and they had nearly 100 yards in penalties. The offensive line can't seem to give Caleb enough time, and when he does get time, his decision-making still just seems suspect. I just don't think Chicago is anywhere near Detroit's level. I know this is a divisional matchup, and I know it is in Chicago, and I know they played them well last time, but I think that was their chance to catch them off guard. I just don't think it's going to happen again, and I think Detroit is going to really want to bounce back after that Bills loss. So I'm taking Detroit heavy in this one. Then we have the Indianapolis Colts hosting the Tennessee Titans. Indy is coming off that Broncos loss that we talked about, and I honestly think that game might have broken them. They most likely ruined their chances at making the playoffs in a game that they could have easily won and were in a very good position to do so. Anthony Richardson is such a unique talent, and in certain situations he really looks special, especially on the ground, but he makes some really bizarre throws, and he has a really hard time completing routine NFL passes right now. Tennessee, on the other hand, is coming off a 37-27 loss to the Bengals. Will Levis ended up throwing 3 interceptions and eventually got benched for Mason Rudolph. And honestly, Mason didn't look that bad. It could have definitely been a different game if all those turnovers didn't happen so early in the game. The Titans secondary has been really good all season, and they've ranked in the top 2 or 3 in terms of yards allowed per game pretty much all year. So I do think that they're going to be able to continue to give Anthony Richardson problems. The Colts are also bottom 2 in a rushing defense, and I think that if Tony Pollard can just establish the run and just control the game, I think that Mason Rudolph is or appears to be good enough to just manage the game and get them the win. So I am going to take Tennessee in the upset to beat the Colts in Indianapolis. Then we have the New York Jets hosting the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are coming off a very ugly, very boring Thursday night football game against the Niners last week, a game in which they did end up winning 12-6 in a rain game. And they have now found themselves at the top of the NFC West because Seattle did lose to Green Bay last week as well. The Jets are coming off a 32-25 victory over Jacksonville. They finally got their win. You know, they've struggled for the past month or so to get there, and it definitely wasn't easy, and they were playing Mac Jones and the Jags. I'm having a very hard time with this one because I have been scammed into the Jets pretty much all season. I almost pick them every week because I just think they have to figure it out, and I eventually just gave up on them. Last week I did pick them again to beat Jacksonville, but that's because Jacksonville's really bad. But I am officially just like, I'm done. If they play a good team or, you know, even a remotely good team, I'm out. And that's what they're doing this week. They are playing the Rams. I want to pick them for some reason still. I don't know what it is about the Jets. I don't know what it is. I just don't get how they're 4-10. It just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. Having said that, it is what it is, and they are what they are, and they've found multiple different ways to lose this year, and I'm going to take the Rams in this one. And the Rams need this game because after this, they play Arizona and then Seattle, and if they want to win their division, they can't drop this one to the Jets. That Seattle game in Week 18 might be absolutely massive, and they need all the wins they can before we get to that point. So I'm going to take LA in this one against the Jets, and we'll see if they disappoint me the opposite way now. Then we have the Washington Commanders hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia is coming off a massive win against Pittsburgh last week. They had over 400 yards of total offense. Hurts had 290 yards and 2 touchdowns, and both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith had over 100 yards, and both of them had a receiving touchdown. They have now won 10 games in a row and haven't lost a game since September. And I have officially moved my position from Detroit being my Super Bowl favorite to Philly. I now think that Philly is the best team in the league, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that. They have an elite quarterback. They have a Super Bowl caliber running back in Saquon Barkley. They have 2 all-star wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and their defense is number 1 in the league right now in yards allowed per game and points allowed per game. They're winning all the big games they need to win, and they're beating all the bad teams they need to beat. Washington, on the other hand, is coming off a very scary game against New Orleans where they almost lost. New Orleans went for a 2-point conversion at the end of the game and did not get it. But the part I worry about the most with them playing Philadelphia is their run defense. They're bottom half in the league in run defense, and Philly, as we know, has Saquon. I think Philly is going to run the ball all night long and control the clock, and I think that they're going to win this game and make it 11 straight games. And I honestly, personally, don't think Philly's going to lose the rest of the year. They have this game against Washington, then they play Dallas and New York, and I think they're going to sweep the rest of the NFC East. So I will take Philly, and again, this right now, as of Week 16, is my Super Bowl favorite. Although I'm a Cowboys fan, would I like to see Philly win? Probably not. But I do have to admit, I think they're the best. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the Cleveland Browns. Cincy is coming off that 37-27 victory over Tennessee that we talked about. Cincy had yet another game over 30 points scored. They're officially 5th in scoring this season, and they have won 6 games, which is crazy. And that would be because, unfortunately, they are second to last in opponents' points per game, which is why they're 6-8. Cleveland is coming off that loss to Kansas City that we talked about, a game in which Jameis Winston threw 3 interceptions and did ultimately get benched before the game was over. The Browns have had some fun games to watch this season, particularly that snow game in Pittsburgh, but when it comes down to it, they are just not a good team yet. They don't have the pieces that they need to have, and I think that Cincinnati has a far better roster than they do. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough points to keep up with Cincinnati, and even though Cincinnati's defense is bad, Cleveland just doesn't have the weapons to take advantage of that. Then we have the Seattle Seahawks hosting the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are coming off a 30-12 victory over the Bears. Darnold had 231 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. They are now sitting at 12-2, and they are fighting for the top of the NFC North against the Lions. Seattle is coming off their 30-13 loss against Green Bay at home. They really just could not get a lot going for the first half, maybe 3 quarters of that game, and then Geno ended up getting hurt right when they started to get some momentum. By the time they had their chance to come back, Sam Howell was in the game, and he was terrible. I have gotten a little bit of heat this year for my takes on Minnesota. I have doubted them a little bit, and this this probably is not going to help my case. But hear me out. Their secondary has given up a lot of yards, a lot of big plays this season. And Geno's biggest strength, if he plays, if Geno doesn't play, this is a lock. Minnesota's going to win. If Geno plays, his biggest strength, in my opinion, is his deep ball. And Minnesota's biggest weakness is their secondary. I think that Geno Smith can take advantage of that. He is not the most consistent person in doing so. But if he can play a good game, they have a chance to bounce back at home again against another NFC North opponent. And if he can play healthy and play well, I do think that they have the ability to beat this team. They have the weapons to do so too. DK, Tyler Lockett, JSN. Geno's been throwing the ball downfield all year. He just doesn't do it consistently. I think they pull it together. Like I said, they're desperate. They legitimately need this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And again, they get a chance to bounce back at home. I just think they're going to do it. If Geno plays, I think they're going to do it. I'm going to take Seattle. Then we have the Buffalo Bills hosting the New England Patriots. Like we mentioned, the Bills are coming off their biggest victory of the year, 48-42 over the Lions in Detroit. And they have really set themselves up nice for the rest of the year. Their last 3 games are the Patriots, Jets, and the Patriots again. They should have no problem finishing the season 3-0. I touched on this earlier. I do think that their defense is a legitimate problem, and I would be concerned about it if I was a Bills fan, especially their run defense going into the playoffs. But fortunately, that is just not going to impact them in these last 3 games of the year. I think they will be just fine. The Patriots are coming off their loss to Arizona, and like I said, they're not on the same level as Buffalo. They're bottom 2 to 3 in pretty much every statistical category this season. And even if you like Drake May, they just don't have the pieces around him right now that they need to be a successful team. I think the Bills are going to absolutely demolish the Patriots. I think Josh Allen's going to continue his MVP run. And like I said with the Eagles, I think they're going to sweep out the rest of the year. Then we have the Las Vegas Raiders hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's tough to analyze a game where the two teams have combined 5 wins and we are in week 16. But Vegas is coming off their 15-9 loss against the Falcons, and Jacksonville's coming off their 32-25 loss to the Jets. Both of these teams are absolutely terrible, but I do think that Vegas is tanking for Shador, and that's literally my only reason for picking Jacksonville, because otherwise flip a coin. Then we have the Dolphins hosting the 49ers. Miami is coming off that 20-12 loss in Houston where Tua just did not play very well at all. He ended up throwing for 196 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. They continued their running game struggles as well, with HN only having 41 yards. I just think it's tough for a team that relies so heavily on the pass and asks Tua to pass the ball 40 plus times a game. I just don't think he's capable of what they need from him. He really did not look good in that Houston game, and now he's going up against a team that has legitimate talent in the Niners. Despite all of San Francisco's struggles this season, their secondary has still been at the top of the league, and their defense as a whole is top of the league in yards allowed per game. And you just really don't have to score that much to beat Miami. They're bottom 10 in the league. I think maybe bottom 8 in the league in scoring points per game. You only need to score maybe 20 points to beat them. I think that San Francisco is clearly capable of that. And I think their roster as a whole is just better right now. So even though their season's over, I'm going to take San Francisco to beat the Dolphins in Miami. Then we have Sunday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dallas is coming off a 13-14 victory over Carolina, but I am not sure that is a real statement victory for your season. Cooper Rush actually had a pretty solid game with 214 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Dowdle also had a career game with 149 rushing yards. But Tampa is coming off the absolute beatdown that they put on the Chargers last week. They put up 40 points on them. They had 223 rushing yards, and Baker threw for 288 yards and 4 touchdowns. Tampa Bay has kind of snuck under the radar this year as well. They have beat Philly, Detroit, and Washington, and they just put the beat down on the Chargers. They somehow got swept by Atlanta this year, which I think is tainting their resume and has made people not really take them that serious. But those games were both close, and I think if a couple plays went a different way, we could be talking about them very differently right now. On the Dallas side, their defense has been absolutely terrible all season, and in particular, their run defense has been atrocious. Tampa's offense as a whole has weapons, but they have Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, who are both capable of big numbers, and I think they are going to run all over Dallas's defense. Tampa's secondary hasn't been great, so I could see Dallas putting up some big yards, maybe getting a few points on the board. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Tampa's offense. So I am going to take Tampa Bay on Sunday Night Football in Dallas. Then on Monday Night Football, we have the Green Bay Packers hosting the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are coming off that 20-19 loss against the Commanders, a game in which Jake Haener started the game and ended up getting benched for Spencer Rattler. And he just appeared to look a lot more comfortable in there. Green Bay is coming off that win in Seattle that we talked about, and that was really the Josh Jacobs game. He had 26 carries for 94 yards and 4 receptions for 42 yards. This man touched the ball 30 times. Jordan Love also had a good game. He had 229 yards and 2 touchdowns. They looked really comfortable in that game and they pretty much controlled it the entire time. They're also huge favorites in this game. I think right now it's 14.5 or 15 points favored over the Saints. I don't know if they'll cover that, but I am taking them to win the game. I don't think the Saints are very good. I think the Packers are very solid. They're gaining momentum going to the playoffs, and I think they're going to beat the Saints on Monday Night Football. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. We also live stream for all primetime games. We will be live Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night this week, streaming those games, doing play-by-plays, and talking football. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later.